Alright, we're back. My name is cEDH Senpai. This is cEDH to tEDH. This episode I want to talk about the different deck types. So archetypes of decks in cEDH. I kind of break them down into three. There may be four. I prefer to name three. So it's turbo, mid-range, control, or stacks. Basically, if you think of turbo, it's a proactive deck with a slant that's trying to win in the first 3 or 4 turns. Usually it's very low on interaction. It just tries to save its own stuff to counter your spells so that they can win the game. They're just trying to win. So that'll usually include decks like Rogsai, any decks that are like Dina, where it's like a turbo deck where it's just trying to do one thing really fast. Lands list decks. Turbo decks tend to be very aggressive and require an answer very early, otherwise you just lose. But once you answer them, they usually just get locked out for a while. The next is mid-range, which is what a lot of decks fall into. They are decks that have massive amounts of value. They pivot very well. They tend to go off turn like between 3 to like 6. Kennen, Blue Farm. These are all examples of mid-range decks that usually draw the game out a little bit just to get their value engines out so that they can accrue more resources than their opponent, i.e. card draw, mana production, or just removing their opponent's stuff that's threats. And the final one, which is the oddball out nowadays, is control or stacks. In my local meta, there is very few control or stacks decks. Stacks tend to lead to giving the game to an opponent that is not usually the player playing the stacks, because no stacks effect usually can hit all players equivalently, and one player usually breaks parity on the stacks a lot better. I.e., if you're going to play something that stops all land, like if you play Blood Moon, and there's a mono blue deck that has basics, you're going to feed them into being able to play better. Or if somebody has a ton of rocks or a Smothering Tide, the Blood Moon just shut off the people that didn't have that value engine. So like the control decks just don't really, the stacks control decks don't usually win the game for themselves unless they find themselves dropping a piece very early and it's very hard to bounce back from. But yeah, those are the 3 archetypes that I look at. There's many variations in between them. Atali is what you would think of as a turbo deck, but it has some mid-range tendencies, and you know, it's okay. It can do mid-range stuff, but it's usually better turbo. Sisse usually doesn't have a lot of stacks in it, but it definitely is a slower deck that just sits back and just lets people kind of do stuff, and they interact where they can, and then they try to win with an elaborate combo that makes 5 mana and searches for a long line. But when you go to a tournament, you're going to run into these decks, and you're going to have to basically sit down at a table and try to figure out if you can tell what the deck is trying to do before you play against it. That way you can possibly mulligan a little more aggressively to stop the turbo deck, or, okay, there's a control deck at the table, I can take a little bit more of a safer hand. It'll enable you to figure out what you're trying to keep, opposed to what you have to mulligan. Because mulliganing, I think, is probably one of the hardest things for most players to do efficiently. Tends to lead you in a bad spot. That's going to lead us into our next episode, which will be about how to mulligan properly. At least in a broad sense. But if you like the content so far, please make a comment down below on the video, and I will I'll comment back and we can talk. If you have any ideas for new videos or content you'd like, just leave a comment down there, and I will try to put it on the list. I have a nice long outline right now of other things we should talk about to get you ready for your cEDH adventure and trying to get you ready for a tournament. But thank you very much. My name is cEDH Senpai, and I will check you on the next video.